The Settlers 3, or Die Siedler 3, as I've often seen it, is most definitely a game. An old game. The oldest I've covered on this channel so far. Only a month older than me, in fact, which... Jesus. But seeing how I'm kind of on a streak of personal firsts as of late, starting with a video about my first Ubisoft game, followed by one about my first horror experience, I thought, why not continue this trend for a little while longer and talk about my first real-time strategy game? Because, oh my gosh, what a beautiful game this is. I mean, even before we get into any gameplay, I can already talk about what an absolute meme the DRM Blue Byte implemented into the Settlers 3 is. You're prompted to enter your serial code if you want to play the campaign, which isn't a problem for me now because I have the game on GOG. But back in the day, all I had was just the loose CD in one of those spindle case things. You know how it was. What does he want now? What is Ankh status, and how have I acquired it? So if you don't know anything about this game, you might understandably assume that I just never got to experience the campaign as a result. And of course you would be completely wrong. Just click Load Game, Campaigns, and wouldn't you know it, full access to every single campaign mission in the game. Like, seriously, what's the point of this? Another DRM factoid relates to what happens if you play a ripped version of the game. I'll mention what exactly that was later, but it's one of those things where technically you can still play the game, but because of a slight change in one of the mechanics, you can never really beat a mission. Oh boy, so now that we're past some of the toughest security measures in a game ever, let's see what Settlers 3 is all about. Upon selecting the main campaign, we first get to choose between one of three, not teams, not factions, we choose a fucking race. Truly a made in Deutschland product. What is race even in this context? Because two of these are more like nationalities, or as close as you can get to them in a historical context, I guess. But then, Su Tang over here gets to represent an entire continent. When you select a mission, you get a little voiceover by the commander you're playing as, depending on which race you selected. And Su Tang is also the only one of these that has this fucking ridiculous, dare I say, racist accent. That or they got Mike Tyson to voice him.
United, we are invincible, but the pirates have found rich deposits of gold in the south. Bruh.
Since the 100-meter sprint isn't on the list, I guess I'll go with the Roman race to get myself started. These are all listed with the respective difficulty, but there's only really one very specific change regarding to how you make one of the more important resources in the game that makes the factions slightly more difficult than each other. Each also has a handful of unique units, and all of the models are different to reflect whichever faction you're playing as. But functionally, they all play pretty much the exact same. So finally, we get into the game proper, and man, I really meant it when I said that this is the oldest game I've covered on this channel. I'm gonna be real, I was really dreading making a video about a game that only natively supports a 4:3 resolution. I didn't mind playing it like this, I mean, I've got about 8 hours of footage as is. I may have gotten slightly addicted, but it wouldn't exactly make for the best of viewing experiences on YouTube. Thankfully, I bring good news. Call this your early Christmas present.
Wrapping my presents, wrapping paper on my presents.
Allow me to introduce you to Settlers United. I don't know if this is a source port or some other black magic that I'm not even going to try and speculate on, but Settlers United allows you to run Settlers 3 and 4 at high 16:9 resolutions, with borderless windowed mode and bug fixes to boot. It's proper widescreen too, none of that stretched 4:3 cringe. I mean shit, they even built a zoom feature into the game. Even if the sprites don't support getting up this close, it's still pretty cool. It also comes with the ability to set up multiplayer servers, so hey, if that's your thing, they have a whole community of people on their Discord server looking to play. I just wish I'd decided to Google Settlers 3 widescreen before recording like 8 hours of footage. You're definitely gonna see some of it in this video. But enough of this mumbo jumbo. Call me Netanyahu because I just can't wait to get my first settlement started. Welcome to my humble kibbutz. There is a lot to be done. If you have never played this game before, though are familiar with other base building RTS games, your first instinct might be to try and select some of these fine, rotund looking fellas to see if you can build something. Nuh-uh-uh, that's strike one, my friend. Perhaps the one thing that differentiates Settlers 3 from other RTS games around this time is that there are a lot of units which you have no direct control over. Little did we know that Blue Byte was onto the AGI train all those years ago in '98, achieving artificial sentience, and infusing it into the settlers that make up the majority of your settlements. Civilian jobs like hauling, leveling, and building are done automatically by the settler AI. You do have some control over certain behaviors, like what percentage of settlers you want to assign to each individual job type, but you can't select individual settlers and control them like you would in, say, Cossacks or Age of Empires. There are some unit types with more direct control, but all in due time. Later missions do tend to give you some basic buildings to start you off, but even they will still give you an abundant amount of resources and tools like the first missions in each factions do. And the only resources needed to construct any of the buildings in this game are planks and stone. Thus, Objective 1. Make more of that shit. The three basic buildings we are going to need are the woodcutters and stonecutters huts, as well as a sawmill. A forester's hut is a nice bonus, just make sure to build that last in case you use up all of your starting materials and find yourself in a pickle. Note that that's 3 buildings just to produce planks, and only 1 for stone. The trade-off there is that, as long as you have a forester's hut, wood is a renewable resource. Whereas, if you mine all of the rocks across the entire map, it's GG. No more buildings for you. Whenever you place any building in Settlers 3, there is one thing you should always keep in mind. There are a lot of different resources in this game, and they will all need to be physically transported by your settlers from one place to another. I've always found this to be a very cool feature of the game, just because of how lively and lived in it makes your settlements look. There's always someone waddling about with a log or a fish, or some other material over their shoulder. Someone always sawing some wood or smelting some ore. It's something that, at least in my mind, is very unique to this game. But if you don't always have that in the back of your head while planning your settlements, you will make things a lot harder for yourself than they really need to be. You might start getting invaded before you've even managed to gather enough resources to build a weaponsmith. Or if you're alone on your own island, you'll find yourself adding hours to the already long mission lengths. And trust me, they are long. So the key to a successful mission is to place your buildings down in a way that minimizes that travel time wherever possible. Place your woodcutter somewhere that has a lot of trees, and make sure that the sawmill is right next door, for example. Later, when we start to build mines, place your iron and gold smelters a short walk away from the mountains. You get the gist, your settlers are thick as fuck, and they move slow. Place those basic buildings down, and some of your settlers will grab some shovels and hammers to get to work. Before a building can begin construction, it has to have a level foundation. If you decide to build on uneven terrain, it's going to take a fair chunk of time for your settlers to get enough dump trucks on site to be able to move all of that earth. So if you want to minimize building time, which to be honest isn't that big of a deal, especially after the early game, find somewhere that comes up green in the building UI. So now that we have some basic building resources coming in, our prospects just shot up to the moon. See all of these buildings here? We can build them. The question is, where? I mean, just with those 4 basic buildings, we've already run out of room within our tiny borders. Only selectable units like soldiers can set foot outside of them, and we can't build anything there either. It is time to expand. The cheap and dirty way to expand your borders is to create some pioneers in the occupancy tab. Here, we can turn regular settlers into 3 different controllable units with distinct jobs. Pioneers, geologists, and something we'll be making good use of, don't you worry. Send some pioneers to the border and click Take Land. This has predictable outcomes. It's not exactly quick, however, and the new land you gain by using pioneers will remain in the fog of war, unless you start plopping buildings and units down there to keep an eye out. But it doesn't cost you any resources to do either. All you need are some free settlers to convert into pioneers. However, the proper way to take land also shows what the game is really all about. Guard towers. Everything revolves around guard towers. Every mission in the game starts you off with at least one of these guard towers, because when one is built and manned by at least one melee soldier, it expands your borders within its sphere of influence. If a guard tower is attacked and the occupants defeated, the attacker captures the tower and the territory within this sphere of influence for themselves. Any other buildings that happen to be within that original territory are destroyed in the takeover. Ergo, if you manage to lose all of your towers to the enemy, you will no longer hold any territory or buildings, and you will lose the game. So, all you have to do to win is take over every single guard tower on the map that doesn't belong to you. Simple stuff, if maybe a little time-consuming, but your starting army is a far cry from what you will need to achieve this task. We're going to have to ramp things up a little bit before we're powerful enough to start pillaging these natives. And the first order of business is to claim a mountain and open up some mines. The quicker you get your hands on some minerals, the easier your life will be in this game. It will also reduce the chances of a sudden rage quit happening, but that's neither here or there. These first faction missions let you get off quite lightly with how much time you can waste just getting used to how the game works. I don't think the AI really attacks you at all unless you start sending units into their borders. It's in the subsequent missions where the aggression ramps up quite dramatically. And if you're not ready for it, your playthrough is going to be cut very short very quickly. So after you set up your wood and stone production, getting some weapons made and taken to a barracks is the next top priority. To do that, we need mines. But we can't just place them down anywhere we please on a mountain and expect results. There are 3 main mine buildings you can construct, with a couple of others, that will only mine the resource they are designed for. So if you place a coal miner on top of a bunch of iron, he's gonna look at that shit and be like, what's all this then? We'll need to send some geologists over to the mountain to actually know what minerals are where. Throw down at least an iron ore and coal mine on the newly marked locations, and soon enough, we'll get some precious, rare earth minerals to play with. Then we're gonna need a smelter, weaponsmith, and finally a barracks. Jesus, that took a lot of time. But sure enough, at the end of all of that, our miners are mining, our smelter is smelting. If they're producing pigs, that means you have an illegal copy of the game. Our weaponsmith is, weaponsmithing. And indeed, we have managed to recruit some new soldiers to the upcoming meat grinder. But already, we have a lot of problems. The first is that all of this recruiting of settlers to become soldiers has reduced our regular settler population, meaning that there aren't a lot of people hauling stuff around right now. That is an easy fix. We just need to build us a new residency building. There are 3 sizes, small, medium, and large, though my motto is always go big or go home with these. It's going to take a lot of building materials and time to construct, but the sheer amount of settlers that come out of one of these bad boys is going to last us a fairly long time. As for the construction time problem, pro tip, pressing F12 progresses time forward by 1 minute. You can spam this to your heart's content in this introductory mission, as well as in any mission that starts you off on a solitary island. You can build ships to transport units so that you can actually, take territory and beat the game. But the AI doesn't know how to do this, meaning that you're never in any danger. But later on, when you're actually going to see some invaders pop up from time to time, you'll need to be a lot more careful. Else, you might come out at the other end of a massive time skip, a dozen or so towers light. That being said, time skipping is downright mandatory in this game. The longest a mission has taken me to complete was well over 4 hours of in-game time, which in reality, thanks to time skipping, was more like an hour and a half. You'll have to take my word on this one since I don't have any footage of this, but there was one mission where I got to 5.5 hours with little progress made before the game crashed on me. I didn't save the game as I went, so XD. Where you decide to place a residency building is also important. You'll ideally want it somewhere deep within your territory so that it's not in any danger of being destroyed when a tower nearby is captured. Because if it does end up being destroyed, every single settler that came out of that residency will become overwhelmed with a deep depression, refusing to do any work. Hence why you also can't just wait until all of them get out of the building initially, then destroy it yourself to get some building resources back. Once it's built, you need to protect it. So that's one problem taken care of, we've got things moving again. But what's this? Moshi Moshi. We're not producing any minerals. What do you mean they're on strike? fucking greedy. The world of the settlers is a harsh one, working on the foundations of a sort of communism scuffed edition. So really just regular communism. If you like to indulge in the finer things in life, like bread, pork, and perhaps the odd fish for supper, you better damn make sure that you become a miner. These fuckers eat like kings. Having the other worker bee settlers Uber Eats that shit right through their doorstep, in exchange for occasionally coming back out of their hole in the ground with a basket full of minerals. No one else eats in this world, which is weird considering their rotund statures. I mean, look at these builds, man. That is peak performance. So what we need to do now is slowly start to develop an entire food industry just to feed the top 1% of fucking miners. Before you do anything though, you should set up your food priorities under the Goods tab. By default, the 3 different food resources are all set to go to separate mines, which can be a good idea later on, but for now, we just want everything to get its fair share. Fish are the easiest to get started with, since they don't require any additional resources other than some construction materials for the fisherman's hut, as well as making sure you have a fishing pole lying around somewhere. The trade-off is that they fucking suck at their job. There is RNG involved, so even with like 3 or 4 fishermen working to single-handedly feed your entire mining industry, you might still find that this is not enough. Especially if you just have shit luck like me.
This nigga out here catching fresh cod!
For a longer term solution, we'll need to look towards some healthy carbohydrates. If there's one thing I know, it's bread after all. Thus, here comes the long list of buildings we will need to get some bread going. We'll need some grain farms, preferably 2 if we want things to run smoothly, a grain mill for flour, waterworks to grab us some fresh water from rivers, and finally, a bakery. Thankfully, this provides us with all of the resources we will need if we decide to expand into the pork market though. That's probably not necessary for such a short mission. Okay, so we've almost taken care of the foundations of our new settlement at this point. All of these buildings are going to take a while before they're up and running, but instead of just time skipping forward until they're done, why not try and kickstart our economy back up with this one simple trick? I mean, what can we do if we're not producing enough of something?
I'll steal it! No one will ever know!
Send out a pack of thieves into enemy territory so that we can have a little peruse of their stock. Some coal would be nice for sure, since we're not making any of that at the moment. Ooh, they have some glazed hams! That's like my favorite type of hams. Tuck that shit right under your shirt and get back into friendly territory. This has predictable outcomes. Of course, if one of your thieves just so happens to shuffle past an enemy guard, their disguise will be blown and they will most likely be killed. And if you see what looks like one of your settlers coming towards your colony from outside of your territory, that is most certainly an enemy thief. Probably coming to steal something fucking stupid like a log. So try to find a quiet, unprotected place to steal from, send them in with some protection, or just send in so many thieves at one time that they couldn't possibly stop every single one of them. I wish I could convince one of my friends to do a little multiplayer match, because I would just grief the fuck out of them with thief spam 24/7. Some time has now passed. Our mines have been up and running for a while now, and in fact, we've managed to build up quite the army. I think it's finally time to do a bit of pillaging. Funnily enough, this is perhaps the least strategic part of this entire game. The only thing you might want to think about is what towers you want to try and take over first, or if you just want to focus on the broader enemy army. But other than that, you just right-click your units and watch them start beating the shit out of some doors and enemy soldiers. In fact, even just the simple act of telling them where to go can be a pain in the ass. They're really not above just straight up ignoring your orders if they have a particular target in sight, potentially just chasing them down to the end of the earth. We managed to take a few towers and get to exploit a lot of labor in the region with the many different resources left behind in the land transfer. In fact, this army was more than enough just to straight up clear the map and end the game. However, there is an important step we missed. Sure, this army might be enough to complete this easy starting mission, but we can make them stronger, something that will become essential in later missions. There were a lot of not so obvious mechanics behind this game that I never managed to figure out when I was younger, to which now, thankfully, I am enlightened. Unit promotions being one of these. You can make your units stronger and have more health through two distinct means. Upping the strength value is very easy. Your army in Settlers 3 is backed by the gold standard. Mine as much gold ore as you can, smelt it into ingots, and just hoard that shit as much as you possibly can. Simply, the more gold ingots you have sitting somewhere within your territory, the higher your unit's strength value gets. Best to set up a bunch of storage buildings designated to hold nothing but gold in it. You will need an insane amount to reach 100%. I'm talking like 6 or 7 buildings full of this stuff at least. Then there are the divine promotions, which are a little bit more involved. The gluttonous gods of whichever race you chose to play as are quite happy to promote your units with health buffs. For some booze. Here is where the actual difficulty differences come in between the different races. Romans have it off the easiest because they only need one building to start producing wine, via the winery. Place a couple of them down and they will start to plant vineyards. When harvested, the grapes are instantly turned into wine. Then you just need to have a small temple somewhere, not the large one, where the wine will be sacrificed. In my belly. As long as the temple is sufficiently stocked with wine, your divine promotion value will go up in the settler recruitment tab. When it reaches 100%, you can pick which class of soldier you want to give the promotion to. The only thing to note is that the promotions only apply to new units that come out of the barracks after they have been activated. Egypt and Asia have a more resource-intensive process for acquiring alcohol. Egypt, for example, brews beer. And for that, you need wheat and water. This isn't so bad if you've already got a bakery up and running. Asians, however, need to produce rice for their alcohol, as well as coal, which is a very important resource for a lot of other things. As far as I can tell, this is the only thing that actually makes these races more difficult than the other. Though if that's the case, they got the difficulties mixed up in the campaign menu. Because making alcohol as the Asians is by far the most difficult. And it really is an important mechanic to engage with as early in a mission as possible. I had this one recording session very early into this project where I hadn't figured this out yet. Sending literally hundreds and hundreds of soldiers off to their doom against just a couple dozen of fully upgraded Ubermensch. Wondering what the fuck I was doing wrong. Until after maybe the 4th or 5th Zerg rush, where I finally managed to grind them down, and noticed just how much gold they were hoarding. Literal conga lines of settlers came to immediately requisition all of it. The spoils of war. That got the old noggin turning. After that, divine promotions were just a quick Google search away because I figured there had to be more to this. Another thing like this later on involved starting new settlements on different islands with nothing but conquered towers, which, yeah, I couldn't figure that one out by myself either. Pioneers are the only unit in the game that can be converted back to regular settlers. So you just have to send a bunch of them over on transport ships and convert them all back. This also involves setting up trade routes between this new colony and your original settlement, just so you can get enough tools and resources to get started. It was actually really cool once I knew what I was doing, but without the internet to fall back on, I would have been stuck. And that's the thing with these older games. Back in the day, unless you were the type to sit there and read game manuals, like, who do you think you are? You would just have to learn these games as you went, just trying different things out to see what works. Sharing what you learned with your friends in school and giving them that eureka moment. Not that I had any friends playing Settlers 3 in school or that this game was particularly relevant by that point, but you get what I'm saying. Figuring the game out was part of the fun. That discovery I talked about earlier, where I figured out that gold ups your unit strength value, that was a genuinely great moment in my playthroughs of this game. There is a beauty to this sort of thing in older games that I don't think we will ever be able to recapture again. The only similar experience I've had like this, more recently, is Valheim. Me and a couple of my friends played the vast majority of that game without looking anything up about it as we played, and had a great time because of it. But even so, the temptation was still there. Someone would eventually get frustrated after hours of trying to find some specific item. And the answer's always laid just an Alt-Tab away. Did you know there's a world generator for that game? You just put your seed in and it shows you where everything is. It's pretty crazy. But alas, maybe I'm just not strong enough to resist the odd temptation. Settlers 3 is still a surprising amount of fun, and if it seems like the sort of game you might enjoy, I have one more bit of good news before I end this video off. At the time of uploading, Settlers 3 is up on a massive sale on Good Old Games. So if you want to give it a try with Settlers United, now is probably a good a time as any.
I want you to subscribe to me
Scav Merchant Hub
on YouTube. Thank you, cringe. Bye.